understanding of sin within our world has lost its deeper understanding. Sometimes we think of sin as merely something that you have the one guy on one side, you have the other guy on the other side. They're just kind of saying, do this, don't do this. You do the wrong thing, okay, I get in trouble with that unless I don't get caught. And it's something, sin just kind of stays on this very surface level of just, it actually comes from this time of the Enlightenment and this sort of way of thinking where it's just ethical choices. And you do this thing or you don't do this thing. And we don't really see sometimes the deeper roots of how sin actually makes us a slave. And Scripture wants to rehabilitate that image, that when we talk about sin in the Bible, especially in St. Paul's letters and Christ himself, sin is seen as a ruler who wants to possess your mind, your heart, your soul, your body. This ruler wants to parody what Jesus wants for you, which is to allow the Lord's lordship to be the one that makes you free. Sin is set up as a king, a false king, and he wants to rule your life. But he rules as a tyrant. He promises much, but then he brings you deeper and deeper into an enslavement in which you don't even realize you're being cooked like a frog in a pot, slowly and slowly and slowly, and actually quite comfortably until you're dead. And so if we look at the readings today, we see some men who are being pressured to sin, and they're being thrown into a furnace. And we have those who are not pressured to sin, but are freely choosing it, the Pharisees. And they're actually the ones who are in the real prison. You just have this interesting dichotomy of these three men who are in the prison of fire, and they have their hands lifted up. They're praising God, they're rejoicing, and they're living true freedom. Even though it seems like if they were just to give in to sin and bow down to this false image, then they would have everything that they could ask for. They could be great. They could be, they were promised so much. And yet if they said yes to all of those worldly things, they would find themselves in the invisible prison under the dominion of sin. And they might find themselves totally comfortable, totally free, until one day they wake up and realize that the door is closed. And that's what Jesus is trying to help the Pharisees and to help the Jews here. And when we say the Jews, it's not an anti-Semitic thing or anything, because Jesus himself is a Jew, Mary is a Jew, but John uses this word to say those who are in some way opposing the way of Christ. And he's saying, I want you to remain in my word, because it's only allowing me to be your king will you actually find freedom. To be a disciple, to sit at my feet. You will know the truth, and that truth will set you free. But notice how they respond. They're in the prison right now. And so their eyes are blind, and they're saying, we're descendants of Abraham. In other words, we're born into the chosen people. We already have our pass to be free. We've never been enslaved to anyone. How can you say you will become free? And then Jesus goes on saying, everyone who commits sin is a slave to sin. That's a powerful image there. Whenever we make that choice to walk against the light, we are becoming a slave of sin more and more. And that's the real deeper understanding that we need to allow to penetrate our hearts, is that sin is something that ultimately captures us. And so we need to allow someone else to capture us. We need to run to the mercy of God, especially in the gift of confession. That's the place in which we can find freedom. But that blindness, that tomb, sometimes comes up in the form of, I don't really need this. Or I can just go direct to God. Or I haven't really done that much, so it doesn't really matter. Or I don't know the act of contrition. I'm going to feel like a fool. Or the priest yelled at me once, 20 years ago. Those different things create walls that keep us in prison. And yet the Lord is saying, come to me. I'm going to give you rest. But if you stay in the dominion of sin, you just become captured. You lose who you were made to be. So let's just ask the Lord that we can have the courage to be like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They were pressured, and they probably had all sorts of thoughts of saying, well, why go into this fire? Why not just bow down before the statue? And yet they choose the truth, and the truth sets them free in the fire. And ultimately leads to even Nebuchadnezzar opening his heart to say, your God is the God who has saved you. So we ask the Lord for the grace to recognize the prison that we are already in, and the grace to be captured by the one who sets us free.